growth requires more than capital.
Why do we call it the cheat code? Nobody said growth had to be fair.
Revenue solves everything.
Welcome to the cheat code. What was our fastest path to revenue?
We tend to like to do things the hard way.
What's the cheat code? It's giving yourself an unfair advantage over the others.
What is it that really works, and how are we going to grow these organizations?
That's our cheat code.
Welcome back again. Another episode of The Cheat Code. I am your host, Justin Gray, along with my co-host, Mr. Josh Wagner, and we're joined today by Mr. David Paul. Many of you may know David. He's the CEO founder over at DWP Capital, great friend of In Revenue, been a great mentor to us as we've gotten into the space. So we're excited to have you on the pod today, man.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here.
So, David, I know it's been a while since we chatted about, obviously, the thesis here. Our thesis on this podcast is, the cheat code, things people do that are just a bit outside the norm, unconventional to drive really, therefore uncommon results. And I thought yours was interesting. Not only is it a 3-part answer, which I guess any good VC makes everything a framework, but, it has some really strong play into how you got into the space to start off with. So give us a little bit of a breakdown, maybe, a little bit about your background, but specifically, your stepping stones to getting here under that umbrella.
Sure. So, I started, I guess my business career in healthcare administration. I worked in behavioral health, and then I decided to be entrepreneurial, and I started a company and I sold it. It wasn't like a barn burner exit, but, I learned one thing, which is I hated being a CEO and the world hated me being a CEO. And so, it was not, but I built something and, I checked in later a couple years, same client, same employees. So I guess it was valuable. So through a little bit of nepotism.
What space is this in?
It was in home care. It was in home care. Yeah, so it was a healthcare services company. It was essentially arbitraging, human labor, and with a brand. It was a shitty business, and I sold it, and I wanted to do something else. I went to an angel capital conference to learn about angel investing. And at the time, I kind of reconnected to my older brother, who is a venture capital private equity guy up in New York, who's much older than I am. We have different mothers. And he basically stated, you should start looking at early stage technology companies in undercapitalized areas like Phoenix and, surrounding non-Silicon Valley type areas.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a relationship with a fund, a $13 million seed stage fund in Arizona. And he said, I think you should go out there and work for free. And, I was like, okay, it's not like I was taking like a huge paycheck, at my company, it's, you put everything back into the business. So I went out there for 90 days and, was an unpaid intern. And I decided I wanted to do venture because I fell in love with it. It was a very steep learning curve. So I sold the business, I sold my house, and I moved out here. And so that was basically going kind of all into it. But yeah, and then I spent about 1.5 years over there, and then got recruited into another family office.
So I mean, like it's funny. I just had a conversation this morning with someone like talking about, how do I get into a space? Obviously they currently have a job. They've always been an employee type of a situation, and like big aspirations and dreams. Like you kind of not necessarily breeze past it, but like, hey, yeah, I went out and worked as an unpaid intern and, then ended up selling all these things. Like, what do you think enabled you to do that? Is that just like innate entrepreneurial spirit, or did you get some advice that was like, obviously your brother and so on, but like, I feel like that's a jump that like so many people are not willing to make.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, I don't know if there's like a full body yes, right, to certain opportunities that come along in your life, certain things to invest in where you're just like, yes, 100% I should do this. And if I don't do this, I'm an idiot, right? Mm-hmm. And that was one of them. It helped that I had, I had some personal capital that, like I'm not trying to make light of it. Like, there's a lot of people that need to figure out their financial situation before they can make a leap like that. I didn't have those problems. So I was able to do it, but it was a full body yes. I just had to, realize that, I'm going to be at the bottom rung of the ladder. I am going to be uncomfortably new in everything that I was doing. And for quite a long time, I didn't know anything about technology, and I didn't really know anything about finance, to tell you the truth. So that was just kind of how I did it.
What were those things, though, that kind of gave you that, yes, I have to, right? Because I think that a lot of people, like at this point, have a lot of big dreams and aspirations, and they're like, I should be doing better, or whatever it may be. But even that conviction, what did you see in that short time that you worked for free that made you say, yeah, I really do need to do that?
Being exposed to early stage investing, there's a lot that sucks about it, right? I will tell you that straight up. And everyone talks about how glorious and wonderful being a venture capital is, and it's not, right? Like I often want to pull my hair out, and I have a hard time sleeping. I take melatonin every single night to go to bed because I'm constantly up with anxiety. But the good things about venture capital is that, you are able to be intertwined with the most innovative, wonderful people on the planet. They're building super wonderful things. And can you imagine trying to just be like a leveraged buyout private equity guy, like going out and like buying like HVAC companies and like seeing how you could just how to rip off like mom and pop, like, and then put it together and how much you could leverage. I mean, that's fucking miserable. Like I couldn't think of a worse way to make money in finance. So it's in the world of finance, to be a part of something that's new and growing, I think was a very cool opportunity. And I guess, the people pleaser in me really liked the ability to be valuable and be liked and be able to, use my superpowers, which is kind of networking and building relationships. I was able to kind of foster the things I was the best at and be able to kind of suss out the stuff I wasn't.
It's awesome. So let's get into the David Paul 3-step cheat code here. Like, how do you think about, like the ability to kind of look back and summarize like those 3 elements of your cheat?
Yeah. So if I was to distill kind of what has been effective for me as a cheat, it would be really 3 characteristics. It would be first, like you have to have a desire, an honest desire, have a full body yes towards something, right? And I think there's a level of maturity people need to have in order to get that desire. They need to understand who they are as a person and what really gives them like emotional juice. Because if you're running towards money, like you can get burned out and thrown away. It's money plus something, right? It's
so important. Like again, so many conversations about like, I want to go, maybe it's CMO, maybe it's, COO, and it's like that next step in the career progression. It's always strangely tangential as well. It'll be like someone who's very tactical and operational, like wants to be a CMO. And it's like, I don't see the bridge there, you know what I mean? But like that knowing yourself, I think is a trait that is constantly overlooked.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, people don't really, they kind of over-rotate on what they think they are and what they think they're not. And so desire is one, because you need to have that for staying power, because you're not always going to feel inflated and have like your ego just like give you that horsepower. Number 2 would be curiosity. Generally, when you are in somewhere, in the context of like breaking into venture capital or breaking into a new industry, you have to be very comfortable being the dumbest person in the room. And you need to ask questions. And dude, I'm going to tell you something. People love talking about their core competency. Like, I mean, it is next level. Like, people love talking about themselves, and they love talking about stuff that what they know they're talking about. And there is no such thing as a dumb question. And if you give them an opportunity to tell you, they will. And if, and like, it literally is an opportunity to become a sponge, especially if you're into a new environment. So having that curiosity, the question is like, what information are you going to say, okay, that's an opinion, or that's something to live by, or that's, bullshit, right? And you have to kind of come up with your own framework on what you believe, but curiosity is the next step. And the third is horsepower, right? You like having the ability to continually persist, no matter what. There's a lot of people, and I haven't even I'm a newer person in this in investment climate. I've been doing this for 8 years. I don't consider myself a veteran in this, but it's amazing. I've been around for 8 years, and I've seen like like the same persona cycle through 3 times, right? Then manifesting in a different person. And I go into a startup event and literally it's completely new people. And I'll like, connect with somebody. Maybe he was an investor now and then he's a founder. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, oh shit, remember this guy? And we just we're rotate. Like, it's just like the 5 or 6 archetypes that kind of continue to cycle because this business is hard, right? So being able to persist when stuff isn't good is important.
Yeah, I want to go back to curiosity really quickly, just because, Josh, you were actually talking about this the other day, like not only having curiosity, but like not losing that curiosity when you think you've got, a stable of understanding. Because we were talking about this as it relates to salespeople, because you see like oftentimes like those first, tranche, that 3-4 months or whatever, we're like super curious, asking great questions. And then suddenly like they turn the corner into like, now I know what I'm talking about. So like sit back and let me tell you, what's going to happen or what's happening here. And like, there's always a fall off when that takes place.
Yeah, I think
natural curiosity is one of those things that if you can keep that, it can take you so far, right? And whether it's sales or otherwise, and we're talking in the context of venture here, but obviously I'm new to the venture game. So I'm curious about everything. Like I'm asking everybody every question there is, but to Justin's point, it'd be great if I don't lose that, which I don't think I did as a seller. So
there's something. There's a great book by Annie Duke, who is a poker player, called Thinking in Bets. And essentially, she distills people's decision-making around, is it skill or is it luck? And basically, we make decisions and have frameworks into our minds based on our own biases, right? And oftentimes, whatever happened to enforce those biases, they could have been luck or they could have been skill or they could have been both, because mostly things are both, right? And so it's being able to distill what really was what, and, looking at things and probabilistically, because there are so many ways to make money in this business, and they're all work and they all don't work at the same time. So you just kind of have to pick your poison.
Yeah. So if you pivot to number 3, the horsepower piece of it, I think it's a very overplayed word, but like the grind, right? Like just the ability to go and get up and have your bit of routine that keeps you on the straight and narrow. Like I think most people inherently have some routine in their life, and leveraging that and being able to use that as a fallback to kind of get up and do the same thing every day. I'm an early morning person. I'm not saying everybody needs to be an early morning person. It just is me. But like I notice the days when, I'm going to sleep in this morning. I'm going to get up at 6:30, at 5. I feel like shit the rest of the day, right? And like I'm not as productive and this and that. So I think just finding those regular rhythms that allow you to be consistent, even when things kind of fall off, is just super helpful no matter what it is you're doing, just as far as keeping yourself motivated to go on.
What are your rhythms, Justin? What do you do no matter what to kind of keep yourself in the game?
I mean, I largely do the same thing every day. Like it's weird because I like a huge creature of habit, but I need like variance within pockets. So like, maybe like, like I'm not like Josh, I work out in the afternoons, but like maybe from 3 to 5. I think it's more like variance in work. Like I want to be able to do whatever I want to do at that moment within like my work construct, but largely like I'm off by 6. I largely have kids at that point. I've already done my workout. Like I'm giving them a bath every day. Like literally I was thinking the other day, like I think I've missed giving my kids a bath like a handful of times, and they're, 6 and almost 4 at this point. So like, for me, I like it's not even necessarily that rhythm that gets me through though. Like I have to understand like what that ultimate goal is. Like what am I striving to do, whether it's this business or any of my past businesses and so on. Like, and that's where like my personal buy-in comes in.
Yeah. I mean, it's so hard, especially like in the beginning when you're early, someone told me once, like what makes or breaks an early stage emerging manager is how you prioritize your time. Right. And how you keep track of your own time, because there's a gazillion things to do and they're all important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, I mean, I'll just speak super honestly here. Like a new manager, I don't necessarily know what those things are, right? Like, yeah, sure. You're trying to figure out what's important, how to prioritize and what to do. But for me, it's like, I just got to do, right? Hopefully it's the right things. I think it's the right things, but again, going back to strengths and weaknesses, like I think I'm good at connecting with people. So I'm like, I'm just going to connect with as many people as I can and try to learn from them, whether they're other venture people, whether they're potential investors, whether, people like you, like that's what I spend my time doing. And hopefully the good things fall out of that. I think that's a hard part about starting anything new. If you're doing it on your own, how do you know what good looks like, right? And that, I think that can be somewhat challenging. So even like coming out of home care into venture, were those people that you surrounded yourself early kind of write that ship for you, or did you kind of write your own narrative?
Yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard because, again, there's so many different ways to invest your capital in early stage. And there's a lot of people that everyone thinks they're great, right? I mean, that's just human nature. We're all kind of narcissists, and we all probably think that we're super great at what we do. Where I work, there were two different strategies, and, like you had conviction over a certain thing or a certain idea or a certain thesis, and you go for it. And oftentimes it just doesn't come out to be true. Right. And there's no way to predict it. The thesis or the founder or, the initial market, but there's no really way to say like, maybe you could have spent 3 years with the person beforehand before you make the investment. I don't know. Like, it's just, there's just certain things that just, you don't know what's going to happen. And being humble enough to know that those things aren't going to, that's not always going to fall into place, but being able to kind of figure it out after, it's pretty painful. But, this business is all about predictions too. And people love to like call their shot, like before they do it and say, well, I told them to do that. That's like a very common thing. But
something, to the point of like, how do you understand if you're doing the right thing? Like actually something that you shared with me super early on was like, you're going to have, which goes against a lot of what I normally do, which is like, you're going to have to say no to things that you have a strong inclination are not going to fit. And that has been like a monster time saver in terms of, just taking that conversation for the sake of taking it, which, I think even to Josh's point, like you have to know broadly that something is the right direction. And then you can, go all in within that area. But like, I get a lot of referrals for like stuff. Like we are very vertical focused. I get a lot of horizontal referrals. And it's like, if I took every single one of those conversations, like I would get nothing else done. So I think it's, like, what is that saying? Like strong beliefs held loosely or something along those lines. Like that, that for me is like the most accurate depiction of not only this space, but like probably anyone's career journey.
And totally. And like when I like originally was like, yeah, no, I need to do that too. And I was talking to a deal sourcing person who sees 500 or 600 deals a year. And I was like, how do I get the people to really understand what I do and what I look for? So I just get like this qualified deal flow. And he's like, dude, nobody gives a fuck, right? On what you do. But like they're going to send you stuff, and that's good in itself, right? So what I do is like, if I receive it from somebody who actually might be qualified, right, to send a good deal later down the road, I'll take the 20-minute call. But if it's cold or it's somebody I don't think is going to like send me something repeatedly, I say no. So it's like everything's gray. Like there's, you know what I mean? Yeah. Everything's gray. There's not a right answer to it.
Well, you said the concept of like testing a thesis and like knowing when to, you're wrong sometimes or this and that. I think for us, like, sure, we're in the middle of testing a thesis, but in venture, you don't microwave. Like nothing happens fast, really.
Oh, no.
Right. So like, what is that time frame? Like you got the crock pot on, you're waiting for that stuff to simmer, and you're hoping it comes out delicious, but how do you really know when your thesis is valid or not, and when you cut bait and move in a different direction?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's certainly the case. And, businesses aren't linear, it's not even just the time horizon, how long it takes a company to mature, but I mean,
totally. Right.
Yeah. You guys have seen it. You take a company from 3 people to 10 people, it goes, like just breaks, right? And they go from 10 to 20, it breaks. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, you just have to like block and manage through that. And I was literally talking to a growth equity guy, and who invests kind of like we invest, but later stage. And he's like, dude, this company was growing 300%. We funded it. It was our first deal. We were spending so much time on it, and it was like flat the next year. And they're slamming their head against the wall. And they were just like, yeah, it's just like, dude, like the founder pulls away from the sales, and because they're trying to company build, and it's just these things, just like sometimes they just take time. And that's where like that's where like I have to get out of, 'cause as I said, I don't identify as being an operator, right? I really don't. Like, so, I would say I'm more of an Excel junkie than an operator. And to know like, okay, that cell did not come like to what it was supposed to be. Like, there's a lot of leading indicators and parts that have to go through there, right? But yeah, it's a balance.
So in terms of like that, because I certainly agree, like that time aspect is unknowable. But as you're getting into a new space, right? Like, and you're remaining curious and like you're trying to absorb as much. At the same time, you have to build credibility and trust within that space as well, right? Like you have to come off as someone wants you to write a check into their business and they believe that you can help them and so on. So like how did you, how do you view credibility and trust there? And like, how did you build that within a space that is, at the time was very new to you?
I was lucky, with Canal Partners, the second firm I did, I was able to source 2 opportunities that turned out to be good and, they worked out well. And I had the opportunity to sit on the boards of both. And I would say founder references mean a lot in the space. The founder references that I think I get and the founder references that I get are totally different, though. It's really funny. It's like, I think they're going to say this, this, and this, but they say this, this, and this. They're so good. It's just different, right? I guess like
Sure. Do you have an example?
Speak this different. Yeah, it's funny. It's like when I'll think a founder will say like, "Oh my God, David's fantastic. He's brilliant." You know what I mean? He's got this like an incredible finance mind, and like the guy. Yeah, and then the founder reference I got was, yeah, David's, he's not going to give you the best valuation. He's kind of cheap. He doesn't have a really good brand, but like he's going to be there first, and he's going to stand by you, right? And I'm like, okay, I guess that take on it. He's like, sometimes taking the brand doesn't help, right? The brand money doesn't, like, sometimes time to market's more important, and having somebody that believes in you is more important than the brand, right? So that's a really good example. And I was like, I guess that works.
Yeah, I think
I will say that there is skill in being first, 100%.
And there's skill in being there for a founder as well, like in a really accessible way and obviously a helpful way, which I think I've seen you do, and I totally underestimated in terms of the time balance, in terms of like what goes into that like counseling bucket versus like what goes into like straight line operations and things. In our case, obviously, like I would expect like go to market operations to be the big pinnacle, which is a huge chunk, but like a lot of time that we spend is just talking through and like creating that grid, creating that right. Yeah, exactly for founders. So not a bad thing to be known for, certainly, as you get that type of feedback.
Yeah, I think the counseling is a very much larger slice of the pie than we ever would have imagined. Generally speaking, and that it's often that weekend call of, hey, or text, you have a second to talk through something? You're like, oh no, what's happening? Sunday afternoon. But it's certainly been interesting.
But what I think about the counseling piece is I was just thinking, I was like, how valuable really is that, right? Like you're just like a tree, right? Like someone's talking at. Yeah, but like now that I'm thinking back to examples, what that means is that they trust you and that you're going to get non polluted information, right? Because I've been in situations where I have not had trust and you get bullshit and then it's too late by the time you get the truth, right? And so when I know the truth, I can actually add value, right? And I think that probably is the ultimate value, is that like, it's not the actual act of like the talking, but it's like you have a clear channel.
Yeah, you're getting that insight that you otherwise wouldn't have access to.
So in terms of like, as you give advice to other folks that might be on like a similar trajectory, like they want to get into a space, either they've got an opportunity to come in or not. You mentioned something around like being able to know yourself, be honest with yourself, and really leverage those strengths and so on. Like, What advice would you give to someone as they're just embarking on that process?
I would say there's like a lot of work that I think people have done online about like doing like personal mission statements and like, finding your own specific like value drivers, right? And I think that actually has a lot of power. If I looked at my career prior to being a venture capitalist, from being a bartender to being a scuba diving instructor to, working as a case manager within a behavioral health center, there's three things that are constant. They're like, I've loved my job and I've hated my job. So how is that possible? It's the same job, right? And it's how I use the skills within those jobs. And so what I learned after doing one of these exercises is that learning, growing, and being impactful are kind of like my drivers, right? Those are my power drivers. Those give me emotional juice. So if I'm learning, I'm growing within my, and that's continually challenging myself, and I'm being impactful, i.e. being a resource to people, providing value, then dude, I'm fucking happy as fuck, right? If I'm doing, if I'm crunching Excel numbers and, like seeing shitty pitches and doing all this other stuff, like, yeah, it's the same job, right? I'm just, it's my framing of how I'm doing the job. I think finding what the drivers are for each specific person is really important. And then, dude, you gotta, I don't know what stage you are in your career, but sometimes you just gotta burn the ships.
Yeah.
Great closing sentiment there. That's so accurate. So, hey man, like if people want to know more about you, find out more about DWP, like what's the best channel for them to dive in?
Yeah. So I have
Plug the podcast.
I'm going to plug my podcast. I've got a podcast called The Capital Stack. You can find it on all your platforms, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. I have a blog called Ramblings, which is essentially me rambling on at 3:45 a.m. I think Josh reads it. Religious.
I do.
He's always on it. And
I'm learning.
And yeah, you are. You guys are doing great. And LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So David Paul at BC, just DM me, and you can reach me in those three ways, and happy to chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. We absolutely appreciate it as always. Folks out there, like, give us a like, give us a subscribe, give us a follow as well. We're doing the same thing, building an audience. And until next time, thanks for listening to The Cheat Code.